Well, hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Christina from myosh, and it is fantastic to have you guys here with us for the third and final session of our Elevate Leadership Capability Series, proudly delivered in partnership with FEFO Consulting. Now, over the past 2 weeks, we've explored how to build resilient organisations, empower leaders and activate workers to drive performance and safety outcomes. And today we're bringing that all together with a powerful focus on high-performing teams and coaches for leadership. Now, because even the best systems and strategies rely on one thing, people working together, thinking critically, speaking up and holding each other accountable. And that doesn't happen by accident. It's built through trust, psychological safety, and skilled coaching. To guide us through today's session, I am absolutely thrilled to introduce two outstanding presenters. First, Terry Swanton from FEFO Consulting, a highly respected leadership and safety expert who's helped countless organisations across high-risk industries develop strong, resilient teams. And joining him is Karen Steele, an expert trainer with deep experience across Europe and Australia. Karen specialises in performance enhancement, service excellence and inspirational leadership, and she brings a unique lens on how coaching can elevate safety culture and team results. You're in for a really practical, inspiring and thought-provoking session here. And so, as always, we really want you guys to stay engaged, ask questions, share your thoughts via the chat box. We want to hear from you throughout the whole session. So this is your chance to take everything we've explored in the series and embed it at the team level, where performance truly, really comes to life. So let's get started. I'll hand over to you, Terry and Karen.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. And another great introduction. You're getting better and better at these. Every time we do it, they sound even better. So thank you so much for that. And thanks to everyone for joining us today. For those of you that have been to the first two parts of this webinar series, a massive thank you for making the time. And for those who haven't, you can go back through the myosh website or YouTube or Spotify and delve back into those. So as was mentioned there, we're going through today looking at high performing teams and coaching for leadership, which I think is a really interesting topic and often the missing link in organisations. So we're excited to present this, and we've got a great opportunity having Karen, or Kaz as she likes to be called. So if you hear me call Karen Kaz, she's very much okay with that, and we're excited to have Kaz here today.
It's for psychosocial, but safety being called Karen doesn't help these days.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's get into it. So a really quick little bit about us so you know who you're dealing with today. So I come from FEFO Consulting. So we work with organisations that value safety and do strive for excellence. We've got a really cool, diverse national team with a really broad range of experience and skill set, which allows us to do some really interesting projects that adds value. And we've had so many clients over the years from all sorts of industries, and there's never a dull moment, that's for sure. Some of the things we do are on the screen here. So some of our core capabilities is around surveys, maturity assessments, strategy, leadership development is a really big one for us. So we're doing that quite regularly with some really interesting organisations. And some of the feedback we're getting and the results that we're seeing have been fantastic, and it's been great to be a part of. And one thing I'll mention as well, which is actually not on this list, is we do conduct team assessments and offer individual or team coaching. So just thought I'd throw that in there with the context of today's conversation. I think it's important. So as mentioned already, this is a 3-part series. And firstly, we had Rachel Fitzgerald from our team and Brad Brooks present webinar 1 on high performing organisations. And then webinar 2, we had Morgan Slocum from our team, and he was lucky enough to have Laurel McLean and Saskia from Ventia. So they head up the training division at Ventia. And what was mentioned on that call was we've done a lot of work with them in the leadership space, and they've had some fantastic results. And they're also building on that themselves as well. So if you want to hear more about that, feel free to jump into that. And as mentioned, today we're going to explore high performing teams and coaching for leadership. So before we do that, just a quick reminder that you can go back, like I said at the start, go to the myosh website or YouTube, or you can listen on Spotify, which a lot of people are doing these days. But if we look at a quick recap from webinar 2, the 3 that we had there was senior manager and frontline workers. So safety leadership capability needs are often different from senior managers compared to frontline operators. And what you see sometimes is organisations going down the path of getting a leadership program together, and it's a one-size-fits-all approach that they take. And quite often we see that that's not what's required, and that's not getting the best outcome. Number 2 there is safety leadership priorities. So making sure that you understand your organisational and leadership capability needs and target the specific focus areas that have the greatest impact on leadership styles. And the 3rd one there is safety leadership impact. Track safety leadership performance and the impact of leadership development to reflect, learn and improve. And that's another one where organisations fall down. They do the work of establishing a program, but they don't look at the ongoing impacts of that program to see what worked well, what didn't, and where can they improve in the future. So as mentioned earlier, the agenda for today is high-performing teams, coaching for leaders, and then what makes a difference. So we're going to provide some practical tips and tools here, but also, like we do with every webinar, we've developed some free resources which you can grab via the QR codes, or you can head over to our website and get them there as well. So let's get into it. I just want to remind everyone that this falls under our leadership program. So we've got a leadership program called Elevated Safety Leadership. And this program is designed for organisations that deeply value and their people and are committed to achieving meaningful and sustainable outcomes. Why this program and what are the benefits of that? So what we believe this does is improves communication and trust, where workers can feel empowered to speak up. So one of the things we do is get workers involved not only during the program, but before the program to influence the content of the program. It creates greater awareness, attention, and a greater sensitivity to operations, so people know what's really happening out in the field. One really important part is that it builds coaching capability, empowered delegation and collaboration across teams. It enables ethical and effective decision-making for complex situations and providing people the structure and the tools to be able to do that. And it moves beyond basic compliance with inspired expectations, accountability, and high performance. So obviously we're biased, but we believe that our elevated health and safety leadership program makes a difference because of the following reasons. One is it's backed by research, which is a very important part of a leadership program. We've been quite specific and we've created a blend of psychosocial and physical safety, which is integrated across all levels of leadership. And we've aligned this with the performance assessment. So going into the organisation before the program is created to really understand where they're at and what needs to be done and what levers do we need to pull to have the greatest impact. So as we begin, we're going to start looking at a few different terms here. So we've got high-performing teams, and a simple definition would look like a high-performing team is one that exceeds all reasonable expectations and produces extraordinary results. These teams go beyond simply meeting goals. They adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining exceptional collaboration and output. They're characterised by a shared purpose. They have strong trust. There's the element of psychological safety and effective communication, enabling members to leverage diverse skills and work cohesively toward common objectives. Now, coaching for leadership, some of you may not have heard this term before. Some of you have been involved with coaching in different aspects but may not have heard this term. So coaching for leadership is designed specifically for anyone aiming to be a better coach by mastering techniques that unlock potential, they drive performance and enable constructive safety conversations. What we see is too often performance conversations rely heavily on that tell and fix approach or directives, where leaders provide all the answers. This directive approach creates an over-reliant or a passive workforce that lacks ownership and the capacity for independent problem solving. And I'm sure we've seen this in our own lives where all roads lead to one person or one department, and that can create some issues down the track. The core elements of coaching for leadership include instilling a coaching mindset, which Kaz will talk about a little bit later, mastering active listening and learning to ask powerful questions. So Kaz will go through this in a lot more detail, but asking the right questions, of course, plays a critical role. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go into the topic of high-performing teams, and what we're going to do is we're going to share some recent research and data regarding high-performing teams. But first, what we're going to do is we're going to jump into a poll because we really appreciate getting the team's involvement and hearing what you're thinking as well. So the poll will be set up now by Christina, and the question we've got for you today is, what do you think is the #1 trait of a high-performing team? Do you think it's trust, clear communication, shared goals, accountability, or psychological safety? So, Christine, have you got that poll up and running?
Yep. And so it's gone live now.
Fantastic.
So hopefully everybody can see that. I can see a few people answering so far.
Excellent.
Clear communication. I think that's one of my biggest pet peeves is when people don't communicate.
And they're all very important points here, but what we're looking for is, what do you think the #1 trait is of a high-performing team? So you've got clear communication there. And what I'd like to do today is do something a little bit different. If you can give us your why in the chat and give us a bit more information, that'd be great. And maybe you've got a short story that you could share in the chat as well. So feel free to jump in and get involved that way.
For me, I think the whole clear communication thing, we're all so heavily reliant on our computers and emails and texts and things like that. And so often the content can be misconstrued, or like the meaning behind the tone or anything can be misconstrued. So I always find whenever there's any issues or any like second guessing being done in an issue, if you just pick up the phone and you call and you clearly communicate with somebody, it resolves 99% of any issue. And yeah, for me, that's why I think clear communication would be my #1.
And I think that's a good point. That's your #1 based on your lived experiences. And
exactly, yes, mine.
I was going to throw to Kaz quickly. What do you think from this one? What would you answer?
Well, I tend to align myself very much with Christina's perspective there. And when you think about, what human communication is all about, it's about the 3 things. It's not just the words we use, it's the tone with which we speak, or, the driving attitude behind our words, and of course, body language. So when it comes to text communication, really we're getting what is essentially the least important part of human communication. So it's not surprising then that, the better communication is always going to happen face to face, because we can read each other's body language, which makes up around about 58% of the message. So, clear communication is, I think quite rare these days, because we use too much text and too much digital communication, and not enough as we are designed to communicate human to human.
Yeah.
I've got the results of the poll here. So 35% of the responders have said psychological safety is their #1 trait, followed by trust coming in second, and then clear communication, shared goals, and accountability all even to that.
Yeah, interesting. I think I've got my own opinion, but I also know what slides are coming, so I don't want to go the wrong way here. But one thing I thought of when we were putting this question together was a little bit chicken and egg. So what comes first? Is it having clear communication, but is it having the trust first, or is it having a psychological safe environment? So what's the starting point? So we'll move forward. But I saw here that Shelley's put in trust, and she said here, I think if you have earned trust from your team, then you've put the work in the other areas. And then F, all the above. So that's come from Thiago, is all the above. One could argue that they're all needed and coexist. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with that comment as well. You can't have accountability without clear communication and trust. You can't have shared goals without communication. So there's an overlap between many of those key, traits, if you like.
Absolutely. We will move on. So whilst just about all of us have worked in teams before, very few have worked in high performance teams. But what is a high performance team? So to put it simply, a high performance team is one that exceeds all those reasonable expectations and produces extraordinary results. And like I mentioned earlier, there is a level of psychological safety, and there's also a resilience within that team as well, which can be formed. So like I said earlier, we're going to share some information today from industry and some research and data. And this one here is from Culture Amp. So a new report from Culture Amp was published in April of 2025, and it was titled The Science of Sustainable High Performance, and draws on data from 560,000 employees across 1,500 companies globally, and to highlight how organizations can design for high performance by focusing on high engagement and providing clear and regular feedback. So what they say is high performance is a system and culture, not just a trait of individuals. It requires intentional design. Leaders must create structures, processes, and environments that enable excellence, such as clear goals, accountability, systems, and supportive tools. Cultivation, ongoing development through coaching, feedback, and empowerment. Leaders actively shape behaviours, mindsets, and team dynamics. And leadership responsibility. So business leaders play a critical role in fostering the conditions where people can consistently perform at their best. And I did read another research paper recently by Culture Amp, and that was talking about how people can't sustain high performance for too long. And it was going through the peaks and troughs. So if you've got some time, you can find that one on their website. It was quite interesting. So a bit more information here around the blog we're talking about and the research. So the research led by Culture Amp's People's and Science team demonstrates that performance is influenced by workplace conditions and can be cultivated over time through strategic decisions. So it's not something that can be left to chance and just happen. It's through these strategic decisions, and that's where we start looking at leadership training or programs and capability uplift, because that is a strategic choice to enable this to occur. Now, there's some research here which I found quite interesting looking at their papers. So the research also found that sustaining high performance is rare. Only 2% of employees can sustain high performance over 2 review cycles. The finding is clear. It's a clear signal, that performance happens in peaks and valleys, with peak employee performance often occurring in accordance with delivering on projects or tight deadlines. And then when we're looking at engagement, so engagement boosts performance. The study reinforced the strong connection between employee engagement and performance outcomes. Organisations with strong engagement scores see greater incidence of high performance, with companies who are in the top 25% for engagement have more high-performing employees, whereas companies in the bottom 25% for engagement have a much lower proportion of high-performing employees. And obviously this links back to teams as well. High-performing employees also demonstrate significantly higher motivation levels, scoring 12% higher on their willingness to go above and beyond compared to lower-performing colleagues. And throughout all of this, and a lot of us will know this, but feedback is absolutely crucial. And Kaz will talk about, asking the right questions and getting feedback a little bit later on. But high performance teams give and receive feedback more often, and they create that safe space to do so. Now, I really like what they've said here. So this is a great piece of advice: is leadership is a multiplier. Leaders' influence extends beyond their own work. It sets the pace for the entire team. And I'm sure we've all got examples where we've lived and breathed this. Employees under a high-performing leader are 4.5 times more likely to be a high-performing, whereas employees reporting to underperforming leaders are 3 times more likely to be underperforming themselves. So give that some thought in your own context. Now, this is also quite interesting with the research I did leading up to this webinar and also pulling our program together. So McKinsey research from 2024 titled "When Teams Get Healthier, the Whole Organisation Benefits." So what they did is something quite interesting. They investigated 14 annual literature reviews and more than 140 published documents on the topic of effective teams. So these guys have gone really deep. Based on their research, they established the Team Effectiveness Index. So they created this index based on the research. The index was deployed to 110 teams across 42 countries over a 2-year period. So these guys have gone all out, and some of the results are quite interesting. McKinsey identified 17 specific team behaviours, which they call health drivers, that matter for team performance. The team health drivers are grouped into 4 core areas of configuration. So you can see there on the screen, we've got efficiency, results, and innovation. So like I said before, they're grouped into 4 core areas: configuration, the team has clear roles and a mix of perspectives; alignment, the team members are clear on the team's direction and are committed to it; execution, how well the team carries out its work; and renewal, the team's working environment is set up for long-term sustainability. The 4 health drivers that had the greatest impact for high performance for a team is trust, communication, decision-making, and innovative thinking. Now, I found this quite interesting from the same research. So the research shows that teams that scored above average on the following drivers are, so let's go back down to the slide here. So trust, so the teams that scored highly on these, so trust, they're 3.3 times more efficient. They're 5.1 times more likely to produce results. Under communication, they are 2.8 times more efficient with their communication, 2.7 times more likely to produce results, and 3.1 times more innovative. Under the banner of innovative thinking, they're 2.3 times more efficient there. They're 2.4 times more likely to produce results under innovative thinking, and 2.7 times more innovative. And the final one there being decision making, they are 2.8 times more innovative with their decision making. What we can also do is we can share this research as well, but if you're looking for it, like I said earlier, it's the McKinsey research from 2024. Now we'll go back to Culture Amp here. So they produce some quite good stuff in this space. The 2025 mid-year benchmarks provided by Culture Amp looked at high performers to identify what they are doing differently. The top 25% of companies score plus 13 points higher confidence in their leaders, plus 11 points higher in career development, and plus 9 points on higher encouraging motivation. Now, this is where it links back to our poll earlier. The data also found that psychological safety was the #1 characteristic of a high-performing team. Culture Amp believe that leaders' confidence and growth remain the top drivers of engagement. So no matter where you are, the levers to pull for improvement are closing feedback loops, sharing growth stories, and balancing goals with humanity, which is a really important part of it. So there's many reasons on why organisations should look at building capability of individuals and their teams, but some of the benefits we've got here on the screen include improving communication and trust, so people feel safe to speak, linking back to that psychological safe environment; build resilient, high-performing teams through psychological safety; strengthen ethical decision-making in complex environments; empower workers with tools and the confidence to act; and move beyond compliance to engaged, high-performance cultures. Now, what I'm going to do is hand over to Kaz, and Kaz is going to take us through coaching.
Thank you very much indeed, and welcome everybody. Look, coaching is such a huge topic, and we've got a lot of ground to cover today, so I'm just going to dive straight in. So when we look at coaching for leadership, we can interpret that in a few different ways. Are we talking about leaders coaching their teams? Are we also talking about leaders being coached to lead their teams? So the one is called master coaching, where we're coaching coaches, and the other one is making sure that we bring to life that coaching culture within our environments. So let's dive into the topic first of all and do a definition of, that's my next slide. I'm going to get us in the mindset of thinking about coaching first of all. Some of you may have had great experiences of being coached. I'm sure we've all had dreadful experiences of being coached as well, but we're going to focus on the positive, because what we focus on, we will magnify. I want you to cast your mind back, everybody, and think about your own favorite coach. Doesn't have to be a workplace coach. It might have been a sport coach. It might have been a parent. It might have been a teacher. Somebody in your lifetime that was your best coach, let's say. And what was it that made them a great coach? What did they do? So if I can ask you to just hop into the chat box and just jot down what it was that made your coach a great coach. What were the behaviors or the underlying principles that they adhered to? The person that brought out the best in you in your career. To share my best coach, what he did for me was he had an unfailing belief in my skills and abilities way before I believed in myself. And I think I rose to his expectation of me. So from my own perspective, that was the most important thing. I don't know about you, Terry. Did you had a best coach in your life that did something fantastic?
Absolutely. Two people come to mind really quickly for me, and what they both did really well is they didn't provide me with the answers. They got it out of myself, which was great. They asked the right questions, and I didn't realize I was getting coached at the time, which is quite interesting. But what I found was I left those conversations or those meetings feeling inspired, but also feeling really confident that I was able to get that answer out of myself and not just say, hey, how do I do this? How do I do that? So yeah, that was the probably two people that I really, really found that inspired me and got the best out of me through coaching, which, like I said, I didn't realize was happening at the time.
Yes, that's fantastic.
Before I go to Cheryl, who's commented, one of my mentors or coaches initially told me to always try to come, rather than come to your superior or your management team with a problem, try and come with a solution to the problem. Try and work out in the first instance what you can do, think outside the box. And ever since then, you can apply that to every sort of instance in your life, can't you? It doesn't necessarily have to be just work. And it makes you learn, and it makes you appreciate the answer so much more. Cheryl has said in the chat box, my career coach asks powerful questions, which makes her think every session. I think that's a really good one too.
Excellent. Those things are certainly key. Asking the right questions, provoking thinking, provoking awareness, because I think there's a lot of coaching or things that are labeled coaching that really don't ask the great questions to build that consciousness around our behaviors. So that's a great one. So making people think and asking those right questions. So moving along, if we can have the next slide up, that would be great. Just a quick definition of coaching, and there are plenty of definitions out there. So when we look at leadership coaching or coaching leadership, it says here, look, coaching leadership is a management style that focuses on guiding and mentoring individuals to enhance their skills, achieve goals, and foster growth through personalized support. So in short, there's lots of different definitions, but for me, coaching is all about bringing out the best in the team or the individual. And to my mind, it's an absolute life skill, whether we're coaching in the area of, health and safety or any other topic. It's a life skill. And it's a reason why I'm so passionate about empowering people to be great coaches, because if you can help somebody bring out the best in themselves, then I feel that's kind of a bit of a life purpose. So I'm really passionate about it. And when we get to coach leaders in their ability to coach others, it's just like, I always call it the gift that just keeps giving. You empower people. And the biggest application of the ability to coach is, if anybody in the room today has teenagers, please do yourself a favor and learn how to be a great coach, because it is the single most important communication conversation that you can have with teenagers to empower them and to make them resilient and self-reliant. So a little extra there beyond the workplace. Moving forward. Go on.
That was on my mind then, Kaz. It's so important, and I try and do that with my kids. And I had, my dad's still around, but my dad was from defence, and it was very directive, whereas I'm trying that different style, and it's great to get the kids to think about them themselves rather than just listen, follow, act, and they start making better decisions over time. You start seeing them; they can pull together the right and wrong themselves, and it helps them, look within themselves.
Yes, the sub-warning for that one is with your teenagers, listening does not mean agreeing with them, okay? It does means listening, but it's really, really important. Okay, so thanks for moving from that definition. So we're going to talk today about, Terry's been talking about high-performance teams. All high-performance teams, whether in the workplace or on the sports field, have a coaching culture that is deliberate. And there are some key elements. It's not just about the conversations that we have, the coaching conversations we have. It's a far bigger topic than that. So we're going to look at these topics here. You'll see the basic principles or the mindset behind coaching, what needs to be in place. With the coaching issues, what are the topics? What are the things? How do we decide what we're going to be coaching people on? We're going to talk specifically about the coaching conversation in broad terms. Some of you may already be have a great coaching culture within your organizations. You may already be using some coaching frameworks, and I'll get you to share those a little bit later. We're also going to talk about what we call the coaching rhythm or the coaching program, the cadence, the regularity, the intentional regularity with which coaching happens. So it doesn't just happen when things go wrong, or we're not just coaching the underperformers. We are regularly coaching the whole team for excellence. So that's a broad overview of what we're going to be having a look at. Let's just move then to the next one. When we talk about the basic principles, the mindset, the attitude, we can actually distill that into a few different areas, because this is so important, because the coaching conversation is the behaviors that we're going to engage in that will get the results. But behind all of our human behaviors are our mindset, our attitude, the principles or values to which we work. So some of the things that are important are that we are in our coaching leading by example. So really, really important that we are not saying one thing and doing another, that we as coaches are following through on our commitments and our actions, and we're very intentional about how we speak with our teams or how we speak with the individuals within our teams. One of the other areas of mindset here is about making sure that we are focusing on the situation or the issue or the behavior and not the person. Okay, so it's really important in our coaching conversations that we don't make it about you this, you that. We're talking about the behavior when this happened, and making sure that, that behavior has been observed, or we have evidence of that behavior in some way. One of the other principles behind it is making sure that we maintain the self-esteem and self-confidence of the people that we are coaching. And I'm pretty sure that if you've been in your career for even only 5 years, maybe even a little bit longer, you would have experienced a demotivating coach. And sometimes that can happen because we put an overemphasis in coaching on focusing on what went wrong or what needs fixing, as you were talking about earlier on there, Terry. So making sure that we maintain self-esteem and confidence. We don't want to be destroying people. That also speaks to psychosocial safety. Coaching done badly can amount to bullying, basically. We need to appeal to the internal motivations of our team. So what that then implies is that we need to know our team. We need to know their strengths and weaknesses. We need to know, their level of competence or confidence. We need to know where their skill is and where their will is in order to be able to coach them effectively, and to get to know them, to understand what makes them tick and what's important to them. Also making sure that as a coach, we are giving all of the information that they need, making sure that we haven't left out anything so that that's causing that underperformance or lack of knowledge or lack of understanding. Because in coaching, we have to make sure that we're not only sharing with our people the logic and getting them to dive deep into logic, but also the emotions behind their behaviors. So their thoughts and feelings about things. Because in coaching, when we can harness the thoughts and feelings, the mind and the soul of people, we can make sure that they are willingly performing at a high level. So those are just some of the things that we need to be mindful of before we even approach coaching. And there are ways of checking that we are embodying those principles ourselves, which obviously we would share with you in a larger program. This list is not exhaustive, but it is the background to actually delivering great coaching conversations. So really important that we understand what drives those behaviors. Okay, so moving to the next slide there, please, Terry. We're going to be talking about what do we coach people on? So what are the issues that we coach people on? So one thing I want to make clear here is coaching is not training. Though it may result in some training actions, coaching follows training. So it's about reinforcing knowledge that people should already be across. Okay, so so we are assuming then that training or the job knowledge has already been acquired. and we know where we want them to build their consciousness around their behaviors and ultimately competence and excellence in their roles. And in order to do that, we have to get really specific about what we're coaching people on. Often, coaching conversations can try to be about too many topics. So as a coach, you really need to narrow things down and be clear about that in the beginning of your conversations, what specifically you are talking to somebody about. And it might be, if it was a health and safety issue, for example, how they completed a specific task during the course of their job in that particular day. So when we're deciding on the issues that can be coached in our team, it may be it's a good idea to understand what is their job description, what is expected of them, what are the skills and knowledge that they are required to have in order to meet the goals and objectives of their project or their task or their job role. So we have to get really specific about the issues we're going to be coaching on them. Also, the really important thing is making sure that the behaviors that we're talking about that we want to coach them in have been observed, because otherwise we've got this, no, I didn't do that, or they're not aware of, what it is that they've done well or what it is they did that could be improved. So we've got to get very specific about that. Please pop any questions up if you have any in the chat box as we go along. If I can ask us now to move to the next slide.
Just before we do, Kaz, I've got a quick question. You've spoken about what do we coach. Can you give an example of when coaching is not appropriate or when you wouldn't coach?
Yes, and so it's really important to establish, first of all, whether we have a discipline issue. So if it's something that, somebody knows what they need to do and they've specifically done something that they shouldn't be doing, especially when it comes to health and safety, okay, that is a discipline issue and not a coaching issue. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, we've seen in some organisations, they'll have a process as well. So there's an example like the fair play model where it will show where coaching sits and where discipline sits and reward and recognition sits.
Yes.
So some organisations have gone through the process or they've applied a framework to allow that decision making to play out. But I think it's worth noting that it's not just recognition or discipline. There is a space in the middle.
Yes, absolutely. And it usually sits, where the person should know what they should be doing, and there's just minor adjustments to be making. If it's a major adjustment, it may be, has this person actually been trained in this? Are they familiar with the critical risk protocols around a particular issue, for example? But that fair play guide is very, very powerful. And also you mentioned there, recognition. Recognition is one of the most powerful coaching tools you can use in an organization. And whilst we're on that topic, what I do know is we often don't give enough recognition for lots of different reasons. And it may be that we are giving recognition, but it's not powerful recognition because we don't know specifically how to deliver it in a really powerful way so that the good behaviors get magnified. But go on.
And unfortunately, that's really common in the safety space is we focus on so much of the negatives, so much more than what's working well and those positives. So I think it's just making sure that we're mindful of when we're having safety conversations or doing anything in the safety space, we're making sure that our feedback is balanced and we are recognising the right behaviours and also picking up the incorrect behaviours. And it makes me, again, think about having children. You want to recognise the good and the opportunities for improvement.
And the key thing is to, in the coach, we're going to go on to the coaching conversation. I might leave this comment for that next slide, actually, but it's really important that we, when we are focusing our coaching conversations, it's not all about what's not happening or what needs fixing. In fact, if a coaching conversation is just about that, then, I would say, give yourself a high probability of failing in the conversation. So here we have a couple of coaching frameworks, and by that we mean a conversation framework, each stage of which will have some skills or steps that we can take that make sure that the conversation has the best chance of being a successful conversation that empowers the person that we're talking to, that builds their conscious competence and their conscious incompetence. So make sure that they consciously think about what they do well and what they where they need to improve their performance. So when we look at those different models there, we've got the GROW coaching model. I know that's been around for a long, long time. I train people in that one. The CLEAR coaching model, the OSCAR coaching model. I'm just keen to hear if anybody else in the room uses any other coaching frameworks deliberately within their organization to ensure that the time and energy spent coaching is impactful. So if you could pop those answers up into the chat box. But what I would like to do is to just, say that most coaching frameworks, and I've trained people across the globe in whichever one the company wants to adopt, as long as people know what the coaching framework is, we can then coach them in being great coaches against that framework as well. But in general terms, any good coaching framework should contain the first element is defining the issue clearly and making it clear that it's a coaching conversation. Okay, making it absolutely clear that it's coaching. And if you're doing coaching powerfully within your organization, coaching will be welcomed as a good experience and not as I'm about to be beaten by a stick experience. So it will contain an element of setting clear objective for the conversation. And then the first part is consultative. And this is where I call it the diagnostic stage of the conversation. Finding out from the coachee's perspective, first of all, what they think they did well. Okay. And then secondly, what sits in the room for improvement, or if you could do it again, what would you do differently? So that first we focus on the positive, and then we move to the room for improvement. Now, the problem is often in a conversation with coachees is they want to just jump into telling you what they didn't do well. Okay. And most coaches will let them carry on with that conversation. I would always stop people and say, no, I've asked you what went well. We can focus on that bit a little bit later. Let's just focus on what went well. Okay, so you're getting their perspective first on both of those areas, what went well, because you want to know what you're going to leverage that's working. Okay, and that also builds their self-esteem. Okay, and the second part of that is to focus in on what wasn't going so well. Then the next part of the conversation, if your perspective differs for them, is to share your perspective. Okay, so that can be enlightening for them sometimes. Sometimes you might be in total agreement with what they've said. And then the next part of the conversation, having done the diagnosis, is where the remedy happens. And that remedy part is like going to the doctors. This is what's wrong with me. Tell me what I need to do. Okay, it's a consultative process. So the second part where we are remedying the situation is we get the coachee to come up with solutions. Again, one of the key problems that coaches fall into is once they've done that first bit, fantastic, let me tell them how to fix it now. We need to continue that approach of being consultative about what actions can be taken moving forward. And then, of course, we need to make sure we lock those actions into tangible steps that they can take, that they feel supported going forward, and we've locked in a time to review that performance down the track for whatever the issue might be. So hopefully that all made sense. So whatever coaching framework you're using, we've got to make sure that we constantly revisit that framework and refine our skills at each stage so that when we invest our valuable time in coaching, it has the biggest potential for payoff. Okay.
And just to add in there as well, so there's so many frameworks out there, like you've mentioned, but the GROW model is quite common and quite well known within different industries. And to link it back to high performance, it's often seen as one of the most effective models or frameworks for high performance. And the reason for that is it's simple, it's flexible, and it can be widely applicable across various leadership levels. But what it does really well is it encourages accountability and clarity. And like you mentioned before, it helps leaders set clear goals, often using those SMART principles, which makes it a great framework to use when we're linking it to high performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, these frameworks can be used whether it is a formal coaching conversation where we're sitting down on a regular basis with our staff members. and coaching them in, how they're progressing towards their career objectives, for example. But that regular coaching, and it can also be used when we become really gifted at having those conversations, those on-the-fly conversations that can happen, at the coalface, if you like, those on-the-fly, catch something, it might even be catch somebody doing the right thing and just giving that quick recognition. Having the right framework and having practiced in that framework, we are always going to be, proper planning prevents poor performance. We all know that one. And we can properly plan for a coaching conversation. We're going to invest that time anyway. So invest in the preparation to ensure that the time spent in the execution of that task is going to be powerful. Okay, so we come to coaching cadence. So I touched on that just now. That regular coaching rhythm that you have within your organization. Now, some of you may already have a coaching cadence that you operate to. You may track your coaching conversations and, log your follow-up dates so that you can check in on your people to make sure that the tasks that they've agreed to, the actions that they've agreed to, have been executed. And again, one of the areas where a lot of coaching falls is that there's no follow-up. But if we have a regular formal coaching cadence, then we can make sure that, the right sorts of follow-up happen, that the employee feels supported. And again, that is a really fantastic way of building trust. Some of those areas you looked at earlier on, Terry, in that poll that we did, all of those things can be built through effective coaching, conversations, cadence, coaching the right issues, having the right mindset will bring all of those high performance team traits to life. So making sure that we have those regular recorded, tracked, agreed actions, follow-ups and support. And let's have a show of hands in the room. If you could just put your hand up and let us know whether you have that regular coaching cadence within your work environments. You may even be leaders yourself. That's fantastic. It is remarkably uncommon, and often, we may even pay sometimes lip service to coaching, or we think we're doing coaching, but we've never put it under the microscope to assess how effective that coaching might be. Really important to make sure that we have that regular cadence. It then becomes part of the culture. It becomes expected by your people, and it has the impact of building the team awareness, team consciousness, team competence. And if we liken coaching, coaching not just only in the workplace, but in sports teams, they coach all the time. They coach when they're on the field. They coach when they're off the field. Their coaches get coached. It's no accident that they are high-performing teams. They don't go, look, we won the premiership this year. We don't need to coach anybody for a while. They're all doing great. It needs to be focused on a regular basis within the organization. And there's strong evidence to support, how that impacts not just health and safety, but all aspects of organizations. So moving to the next slide. Over to you, Terry.
Yeah, thank you. So this is where we're going to start talking about, what actually makes a difference. So looking at our health and safety index benchmark data, which is such an amazing opportunity we've got to look at what's happening across all industries, we found this quite interesting. So the most highly correlated responses to the question around my supervisor encourages team members to make suggestions to work practices are, so we've got there, my team has good cooperation and teamwork, my team members openly share important information, and my team speaks honestly and openly. So the key message from our index data is that leaders shape team effectiveness. The way leaders encourage open communication and feedback directly impacts how well teams work together. Encouraging suggestions really does matter. Teams are so much more effective and they can reach high performance when the supervisors or their managers, their leader, whoever it may be, invites team members to suggest improvements and they really do listen. Positive behaviours drive results. It's as simple as that. So cooperation, honest sharing of information, and open conversations, which are backed by respectful relationships, are strongly linked to better team outcomes. And you need to focus on your strengths. So build on what works well in your team, leads to greater effectiveness. And like we've mentioned a couple of times today, that psychological safety is key. Leaders play a crucial role in making team members feel safe to speak up, but also contribute. So some of you may have seen the work done by author Dr. Christian Pognitzin. I hope I got that pronunciation right, but he believes that there's 5 signs of a high-performing team. So the first one is clear objectives. They've got defined goals where everyone understands the target, they maintain focus and direction. And then there's role clarity. So each member knows their duties and overlap and confusion is rare. Now, the next one is linked to communication, which is effective meetings. Time is valued, meetings are planned, they're concise and they're productive. There's genuine interactions. So throughout these meetings, any thoughts are expressed openly and there is some authenticity and respect there as well. Foundation of trust. So meaningful connections, team members bond both professionally and socially, which strengthens teamwork. Respectful environment, conflicts are addressed quickly and fairly, and everyone feels safe to be themselves. We've got open communication, where there's a culture of safety, where ideas are shared openly because there is a culture of trust. There's transparent updates, so progress and challenges are consistently communicated, which keeps the team aligned. Now, the last one I'm going to talk about is regular recognition. So making sure that we've got frequent appreciation, so efforts are regularly acknowledged, which improves the morale and motivation. But we need to make sure that when we're doing this, they're coming across genuine, because they are genuine. And we don't want to overdo it as well, whether it's too negative or too positive. We need to make sure we've got a nice balance there. But one thing that's so important for high-performing teams is celebrating success. So making sure that we're celebrating both teams and individual accomplishments, making sure that they're recognised, because that creates a supportive culture and a positive culture for the team, which can enable high performance. Now back over to you, Kaz, to talk about some coaching.
Yes, look, some of these we might have actually, touched on a little bit as we go through. And I've got to say that, these are not exhaustive lists. There are many pitfalls of coaching, and there are many leading practices of coaching. So one you touched on early, and I think it's one of the key ones, is telling versus asking. Too much, sometimes that's driven by the need to cut time short, for example. Let's do this quickly. So telling versus asking, really, really important. We've got to ask, and we've got to ask good, open questions. And that might seem, I feel like we've been banging on about open questions since time immemorial. But really, it is an absolute life skill to be able to ask open questions. And I've been training since my mid-20s. And it's something I still consciously think about when I am in conversation with people, when I know that I will be best served by a good asking open question. If it comes out of their mouth instead of my mouth, it's much more believable for them. So I'm just giving them the opportunity to share of their thoughts and feelings. And now, just because we ask those questions doesn't mean they're always going to respond openly and freely. Sometimes we may need to say, I'm going to give you a bit of time to think about your answer. And, let them dwell on it, because we don't want to just have them disempowered and go, I don't know, you tell me, you tell me. Now, I would mention this one earlier on. The topic might be too broad or unclear. We might be trying to deal with too many issues in one conversation. And how we decide which one, well, when it comes to health and safety, obviously the most important topic is the one that is creating the most potential for, disaster, let's say. Choosing the topic and being very clear about the topic. And if we need to have a couple of conversations, or we need to, talk about two things, be clear up front about that. There's a couple of issues we need to discuss today. The intention of that is to ensure that, by the end of today, everybody's going to go home safe and come back having, knowing exactly how to do this task the next time we face it, whatever that might be. One of the things that the mistakes that people make is that they coach only the underperformers. Now, when we look at any organization, if we're only coaching those underperformers, what happens to the overperformers? Well, they can often slip or feel undervalued because of their lack of attention on what it is they've done. And when we coach those overperformers as well, we can capture the greatness to share with the rest of the group. And we can leverage the great behaviors. We can, identify those people that want to go further in the organization and have, great aspirations to improve and pursue their career. Lack of buy-in, okay? It might be lack of buy-in to the issue that we are trying to diagnose, or lack of buy-in to taking action to fix things. And this really comes down to, communicating better. And within that coaching framework, we can give you lots of hints and tips in how to increase buy-in. If we don't get buy-in to the diagnosis, we won't get buy-in to the remedy. It's as simple as that. Okay. And the key thing is no follow-up. If we are coaching people, we commit them to action and we don't follow it up, then all we're saying is, disregard this conversation, just carry on doing what you're doing because I'm not going to take any notice anyway. So we don't create that change. Some of the things on the right-hand side directly address what we've put on the left-hand side. But when we look at their leading practices, plan and prepare 30-70. What I mean by that is who's doing the talking in a coaching conversation. If you come out of a coaching conversation and you think, I think I was pretty much talking the whole time, you weren't having a coaching conversation. You were telling somebody. So the key principle, if you can make it 30% you talking and 70% the coachee talking, then you've probably got the right balance. Okay. And how do we find that out? Well, the best way, and when I'm coaching coaches to coach their team, I will often get them to record a coaching conversation. And then we have the absolute evidence of how they are coaching to be able to help them improve. Okay, so most people are, I think it was this, I think it was that, but you can actually record a conversation and define what it was and have further learning. It's important for coaches to continually be coaching themselves as well. Setting clear and positive direction, I think we've covered off on that one. Coaching the whole team, not just the underperformers. Use observable behaviors and evidence wherever you can. Okay, because the more observable and the more evidence we have, then the more people have to, address the issues or the greatness, can magnify that greatness, replicate the greatness, and then address the key issues. And of course, establishing smart actions, so those specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. Monitor those and make sure that your team feels supported. At the end of a coaching conversation, it always should be followed up by, just check in with me whenever you like. If you need any help with that, just come back. And if you need to review during the execution of that task, just come and talk to me. That support. We'll board all of those practices to create a high-performing team. Back over to you.
Thank you so much, Kaz. So as we wrap up for today, some key learnings here from this webinar. The first one is high-performing teams. High performance is not hired, it is designed and it is cultivated by business leaders. The second one there, coaching for leadership. Health drivers are highly predictive of team performance outcomes, trust and communication. So making sure we're looking at what those drivers are and building that in around your leadership program, your coaching. And what makes a difference is a leader's influence extends beyond their own work and sets the pace for the entire team. Coach leaders to reflect on their own performance and also their teams as well. Now, we do have some great resources for you. So we've been sharing this each webinar. So if you want to get the full version of this, go to our website, or you can get the QR code there in the middle. But we've also got something else that I'd like to challenge people today with. So on our website, we've got a downloadable for a guide for a grow coaching conversation. So if you want to get into coaching, but you've never tried it, you don't know where to start, have a look at that. There's some really great resources there, some example questions. And I challenge you, if you're wanting to get in this space, I challenge you to download that. Find a person that you can practice with. It might be your kids. I don't suggest doing it with your partner. It may not go down too well, but I suggest doing it with somebody, a workplace would be great. But also maybe look at your team and say to your team, I'm trying something different. I'm going to try and do a team coaching conversation. Or if that's a little bit too daunting, you might want to engage someone external like us or Kaz to help out with coaching yourselves or doing a team assessment or a team coaching session as well. So the challenge is there. And for those of you that aren't looking to do coaching but would like to be coached, the same challenge for you is to reach out to someone and ask them, can you give me a coaching conversation? Again, it could be someone internally that you know, it could be a friend, family member, or it could be someone external like us as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Terry. Is this the code you were talking about with the challenge?
Yeah, so we've got a QR code there, or if you head over to our website, which has been revamped, and I think it looks pretty cool. There's some resources there for this conversation around leadership and coaching, but there's also resources for all the key topics in the safety space. As you can see there, there's psychosocial, there's some training information there as well. There's a heap of content in there now, which is quite valuable.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Now, for everybody that didn't get a chance to scan those QR codes or miss the one prior, I will send them out with the recording of today's session in the email, so you'll have a link to all of those as well. Terry, Kaz, thank you so much. That was incredible. So much valuable information in there, especially thinking about those real life scenarios and what we can do to ask better questions and things like that. So thank you so much. This wraps up the third session in our three-part series. So if you've joined us for all three, biggest thank you to you guys. And if not, there is plenty of time to catch up on all of this. So we will send you the links to everything after this, and I hope you all have a wonderful week.